Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Tax day, not so happy hour. Technically, it's not really tax day. Technically, tax day is Monday. Hello, men and gentle ladies. Hi, Eagle Brain. So I thought, even though this came out a while ago, a couple weeks at least, I thought today would be as good a day as any to go through it because it is tax day. And while it's fresh in your mind, hopefully you've done your taxes or at least looked at it, um, how much you're getting robbed by the federal government. We could go over how much money they want to spend on education and what they want to spend it on. Because I think many of us, most of us, wherever you stand on the specifics, probably are dissatisfied in some way, shape, or form with America's public education system for which we pay dearly. And so I just think it's a really good idea each year to take a look at what's being spent, especially at the federal level, because for those of you who are not aware, the Federal Department of Education is younger than I am. It is a solid 10 years younger than I am. Created by Jimmy Carter, we managed to make it all the way to the 70s without it. We went to the moon. We had an industrial revolution. We won the Second World War, did a lot of great things, and rose to the tippy top of prosperity and peace and everything without a federal Department of Education. And what a lot of people don't understand is that it is actually not constitutional for the federal government to create a curriculum, a national curriculum. That wouldn't be allowed. Okay. We do have federalism. The states are allowed to decide these things. And so it is pretty sad that there wasn't more outcry when we had Common Core, No Child Left Behind. Well, one came before the other, and a few other Race to the Top, which ought to have been called Race to the Bottom, and so on. National standards that were implemented because, they use a word like standards and people think, well, that's not really a curriculum. Isn't it though? If you create a set of standards and they're pretty vague, but at the same time, there's no accountability as far as, except for standardized tests, and you won't get your money from us, the federal government, if you don't meet these standards. You're effectively creating a curriculum that is designed to teach to the test. So it's kind of a roundabout way to get around the Constitution and have the government, i.e., politicians, concentrated in one area with lots of power and lots of money, decide what's going to be taught at the state level. So we've been steadily moving towards a more federalized control over our public education since the late 70s. And it is getting, forget it, it's gotten out of hand in terms of the amount of extortion. Yes, I'm calling it extortion that the federal government, gets involved in with the states, because at this point they've put so many, tasty tidbits for the voters to go, I want that thing. That sounds nice. Yeah, I want that. That sounds really awesome. Don't understand half the words in that sentence, but I want that. And so governors are hard pressed to say, well, I'm going to have to do a bunch of stuff and jump through a bunch of hoops, and our board of education is going to have to train our teachers, certify our teachers, buy certain curriculum materials, and do certain things in order to get that pile of cash. That's why I call it extortion. And then, of course, you have whole new sets of mandates, civil rights kind of mandates, Title IX, Title I, and all different things, which require the states to provide and do certain things. That's not to say they didn't do them before. But now the federal government's stepping in to say, we want to oversee it too. And of course, here's a giant pile of money. So I don't know. People seem to think that when you provide a giant pile of money to pay for the implementation of the thing you're requiring, that thing actually happens. And it turns out that's not the case. Ask any parent of a special needs kid. They'll tell you. So lots of money, lots of power concentrated in the federal government. And most voters don't really understand that, don't realize the amount of pull it has on the states. And at this point, I would say comparable to, the EPA and other kinds of, and even after Obamacare, things like that, you've got tremendous amount of administrative control at the federal level over what happens in your state. So when you say, well, I live in a red state, it's not going to happen. No, this isn't bad stuff isn't happening here. Really? Okay. Well, unless your governor is willing to turn away from possibly, hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding and somehow still run the school the way the voters expect it to be, at least pretending to run, um, they're probably going to do what the federal government says. So without further ado, let's take a look at this charming budget. Now, I've annotated some of it, like the summary sections. The rest, I'm probably going to skim through a fair amount because what they do is there's a summary section, which is where I'm going to concentrate my efforts and analysis. And then we'll kind of just, skim through the sections on the different levels of education and then jump ahead to the spreadsheet. And that's where I'm hoping there's some accountants in the crowd, because maybe you can help me understand what some of these things mean, because I'm a little confused. I'll be very honest. Okay. Here it is, U.S. Department of Education fiscal year 2023 budget summary. And it has a really long table of contents. There's so many things. This is why most parents go, yeah, not looking at that. Don't understand it. I don't get it. Okay. But let's go through this. Now, first, this always cracks me up. I'm going to read it to you because this kind of garbage. The way they have to sugarcoat everything to make it seem like they're doing something so wonderful, it makes me crazy. But let's read it. This is our Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. Federal budgets are an expression of values. Isn't that the truth? This proposal reflects the Biden-Harris administration's deep belief in the importance of education and the success and well-being of our nation's students. Love to know their definition of success. Definitely love to know their definition of well-being. Yeah. Education too, while we're at it. But anyway, let's continue. It's my hope that Congress answers the president's call for continued investments, spending. Anytime you see investments, spending. We have yet to see a return on our investment. In fact, the stock market at the worst part of the pandemic was doing better. Well, actually, it was doing okay. But I mean, when it started going down, okay, this is education in America. Like that. I wouldn't call this investment on its best day. I would straight up call it gambling, waste, burning the money in a pit from hell. I don't know what, it's not investment, but okay. Continued investments that help our schools hire and support more teachers, school counselors, school counselors. Let that hang there for a moment. And other personnel who can nurture the social emotional. There it is. The first paragraph. They can't even get away from the first paragraph without social emotional. Right there. There it is. Notice it's first. Social and emotional is first, and academic. Yeah, that's step 2. That comes second. It's actually third. Social first. Intentional. Emotional second, because if you get the first one wrong, I'm sorry, your feelings are wrong. And then some academic stuff, maybe, like if we have time, that'd be a bonus. Okay. And mental well-being, because apparently your social and emotional and your mental well-being are separate. Yeah, probably they are, because when you get to being the social and emotional person they want you to be, I promise your mental well-being is more like your mental not so well-being. And maybe it's your mental well-doing, according to them, of our children and youth in this critical time. It's always a critical time. Is it ever not a critical time? By the way, this word critical doesn't mean what you think it means. They don't mean critical time like super important. It's always important. Why is today more important than yesterday in someone's life? No, it's always an important day. Okay. They mean this period of time where we're really focused on critiquing and deconstructing everything. They mean it. They'll keep saying it. It's like a tick. And beyond. Across the country, we must focus our efforts on recovery. Translation, not going back to the way things were because we didn't like it there. We purposely want to change things. That means ensuring all students, especially those. Is this America? Is this America? Okay. This phrase, especially those, should never come into play in a document from the government. No. Right away, that's your clue that they think in equity terms. They think in discriminatory terms. It should never be especially those. The second you allow the government to decide that someone especially needs something, we no longer have equality under the law. And I'm sorry, yes, that goes for you have a special need child, you have this. No, special needs children even are they're guaranteed equal, right? So a free and appropriate public education that is equal to what the kids who are not special needs are getting. Not especially, not better, not we got to focus on them because you guys will be fine. Y'all be, you're good. Bye. Whatever. We're going to ignore you because especially people just blow right by this. They just blow right by me, especially those from underserved communities. I guarantee you go look at your school district website right freaking now, and you'll find the phrase especially somewhere in there to refer to students. And if you are not pissed off about it, without even going into the rest of this budget, if you don't just stop right there and go, I'm sorry, no, not in America. I love children. I love all children. I want all children to get an education, not especially anyone. Not especially anyone. And by the way, and this is a very unpopular opinion, but I'm going to freaking say it. If I'm put on the spot, if somebody just says, oh, come on. Certainly you think that our, dollars, our investment in education would be better spent somewhere. So, but yeah, you want to know my honest answer to that? Although I wouldn't do it because I believe in the principles of liberty and equal opportunity and equality under the law. If you really pressed me, I'd say especially the high flyers. Yeah, sue me. I'd say especially the kids working their asses off, showing real promise, making something out of themselves, applying themselves, showing initiative, showing up every day, having a good attitude, developing good character, and really willing and able to improve themselves and make the most of the education we as taxpayers are buying for them. There, I said it. Now y'all can send me hate mail. I don't care. But no, I would never put that into law. But if you're asking my personal opinion as far as value, no, there should never be especially those, and especially based on something like this. Underserved. What in the flipping hell is that? Is that something you can objectively measure? Who defines that? Miguel Cardona defines it. The federal government defines it. Politicians define it. You don't define it. There's no scientific definition of underserved communities. Underserved implies there's an appropriately served. And we all know what it is. We all know exactly what, that's the magic number. That's the magic amount of service for education for all Americans. This is federal. This isn't at your state level. That means all 360 million, whatever of us, or the however many millions of students. That means we magically know what that number is, and it is served. Okay, you have been served appropriately, but you have it. You're underserved. And then how far underserved? $1, $100, an hour, 10 days, a year? What? What is the metric? What are we using to evaluate this? Nobody asks. Nobody cares. Oh, I just accept this premise. There's such a thing called underserved communities that's legitimate, and we should especially concern ourselves with them. And I say this, and I'm sure there are people out there going, oh my God, she's so mean. I'm just giving it to you straight, guys. We are a country that is supposed to have equality under the law. Not picking and choosing winners and losers, and we like you better, and you're more needy, and you're more important. That is when you start getting into communism, each according to his needs, and blah, blah, blah. Okay? And those most impacted by the pandemic. And again, how are we measuring that? What, those most impacted? Okay. Somebody was growing up, middle class, but dad died. No income now. There went their main source of income. They can't keep their house. And they live in a middle class neighborhood, but they're getting foreclosed on. And that's a pretty big impact for them. Mm-hmm. Or somebody else, they got sick and now they have some kind of lingering health issues, blood clots, things like that. They need regular medical attention, but also middle class. Somebody lost their family business. Now they're working 4 jobs, driving an Uber, etc. Also middle class. Statistically, I think it's safe to say there's a whole lot of middle-class people who might on the surface look like, to Miguel Cardona, not super impacted. I don't know what his standard is. What does most impacted mean? Is it the students who are performing at the bottom and we're assuming that was an impact of the pandemic? Or is it people who are coming out of traumatic situations because of what happened with COVID policies or illness? We don't know. It's just the term. We're supposed to just go, oh, yes, that's very important. And we want these, especially those from underserved communities and those most impacted by this pandemic, we have to ensure that they receive the resources they need to thrive, especially them. We're going to decide who they are. And we might, we might tell you, we might not. We might move those goalposts day to day. We might redefine those words as it suits us politically, or when we need to ask for more money or another rescue package or something like that. Importantly, is there anything about this budget that's not important? This budget also invests in access to affordable higher education. Why? What? I'm sorry, why? Why is it the federal government's job to invest in the credentialing of adults? I'm just going to throw that out there. Question that premise. I want an answer. Why is it the proper role of the federal freaking government to invest in higher education? This is now an adult credentialing process. You can maybe take me to 12th grade with some form of, public funding for education, because presumably, at least it was long understood that if you don't have that level of education, you might not be a responsible voter. Although I have met classically educated 8th graders who would be better voters than some of the PhDs I have met. So I don't think it's an arbitrary number of years. I think it's a kind of education and a kind of thinking process. And I don't even know that you need to have read a certain number of books or even a certain kind of books. But you do need to be able to think and read and have numeracy to a certain level to know when your people are bullshitting you about money like this entire budget is doing. And like I said, I have met some classically educated kids, homeschooled kids who do a better job. But if you insist on taking me all the way to 12th grade and keeping kids out of the workforce till they're 18 and on the public's dime, we can have a conversation. It's going to be fairly contentious, I warn you. But higher ed? Hell no. Hell no. Okay? But yes, this is, so we're supposed to take this. And the creation of stronger pathways that meet the demands of our workforce and connect students to well-paying jobs and fulfilling careers. The federal government is not a job service for the companies or the public sector, public or private. That is not their job. It is not their job to create a workforce. If private companies, even the government wants an educated workforce, then they should invest in it themselves. Training, internships, apprenticeships, on-site programs. And by the way, many of them are already having to do that because kids are coming out of high school and college, most of which is subsidized by the federal government as it is, and having to do remedial training for these people because they can't freaking read and write. So companies are already spending more than they've ever spent before on remedial English, remedial math, remedial everything, because otherwise they simply won't have enough workers unless, I guess they could go just move half the population of India to here and maybe we'd be okay. But not in every job. So we're not even doing that. We're not even providing like literate service workers with 12th grade. But now we're going to go in the business of educating people in college. What they still get to choose. They want women's studies and gender studies and, the whatever critical theory to the nth degree, but we're going to pay for that. And that's somehow meeting the demands of the workforce and connect students to well-paying jobs of fulfilling career. It's your government's job to make sure you have a fulfilling career. Did you know that? I can't imagine why our young people think that the government is in charge of their happiness. What a shock. All right, so now that I've sufficiently alienated enough of you, all right, let's go into the summary of this. By the way, I'm going to just pause for a second. If you guys think I'm being too shrill or too emotional about this, let me know. I have gotten that feedback, not here on this channel, but elsewhere. People have said, I used to watch her, but she's just so shrill. She's just so shrill. She thinks she knows everything. Believe me, I do not think I know everything. These are just my opinions. Okay, that's it. They're my opinions. Take them or leave them. You're getting the unvarnished Deb here. I'm letting it all hang out. But If you find that to be too much, I do apologize. Yes, I'm passionate. I am passionate. And I accept the idea that a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's totally fine, which is why I put the link for you guys to go through it on your own. But I live and breathe this crap every day. And what bothers me really more than anything is the number of premises that are put forward as fact that are absolutely opinion based. And we're talking about billions of dollars that they don't make except on their little fancy printing press, which reduces the value of our dollars. So I go to the store now and I can get one itty bitty little steak for $10. And that's cheap compared to some places in the country. All right. So the summary. Once again, we are told that this budget, is reaffirming, making good on President Biden's commitment to reverse years of underinvestment in federal education programs. Okay. Underinvestment, we already discussed how investment is spending. Underinvestment implies there was a mark that is the right place, the right amount of dollars for these things. Well, if that were true, we could go back to the administration before the last administration, to the Obama administration, where I would assume things weren't underinvested in. It was 8 years of bliss, wasn't it? Okay, so were the results so awesome? Were those federal education programs doing so great and then they took a nosedive because they were underinvested? So how do we know they were underinvested? Because your program that you like, that had your pet little friends that vote for you, didn't have jobs during the last 4 years? Or they had to see some cuts in their salaries, that they didn't get a raise every single year. They had to live like regular schlubs out here in the private sector. I mean, please explain what underinvested means, because I don't know. That's not a word with an objective meaning. We, the taxpayers, have a right to know. And building on fiscal year 2022 budget requests and investments in the American Rescue Plan. So he's building on that. So in other words, if you guys haven't watched my videos on how much the ARPA plan, ARPA was just one of like 3 rescue plans because President Trump put a couple into place. Remember, there was the COVID relief funds or whatever. There were multiple education funding bills that passed into a giant pot of money. Enormous billion. I think it was like $75 billion by the time it was done. And then there was more. ARPA added more for social emotional learning. So it's insane how much money, and they're still sitting on it. They have, I think, until 2026 to spend it. So that money's still sitting there. Lots of it unspent. And so what they're saying is, and now we're going to build on that. We're going to increase the budget that was just the standard education budget on top of the wad of cash they're still sitting on, they got from rescue plans. So keep that in mind. It's not like we're going, okay, COVID's over. We have a little bit about this thing. You didn't spend it. Obviously, you didn't need it for the crisis. So why don't you guys go back there? We're going to subtract that amount from the budget that we would otherwise need. Yay, we saved the taxpayers extra money. Aren't we responsible? No. They're building on the fiscal 2022 budget and investments from the ARPA plan. While the main challenge over the past 2 years has been safely reopening schools for in-person instruction, wrong buzzer. The main challenge has been persuading the teachers unions to let you reopen at all, safely or not safely. I think Florida was doing just fine. So was South Dakota? Yeah, I think there were a few states that never shut down, and even Georgia opened way before everybody else. And I don't think there was mass death. Did I miss it? Did you guys see mass death? I didn't. So I don't think it was the big challenge that you're saying it was, unless you're talking about the challenge you had fighting with Randy Weingarten. That must have been difficult. She is kind of a shrew. Anyway, has also changed the education landscape moving forward. Has it? It's changed the education What's the education landscape? Let's continue. The fiscal year 2023 president's budget for the Department of Education would make historic investments. Yes, it will spend more than we've ever spent before in the nation's future prosperity. Okay. Now he's connecting our future prosperity to spending, so increased aid for schools with high poverty rates. That means people in the school are impoverished. And somehow our future prosperity depends on spending money on that. And that'll be more relevant as we get into the rest of it and you see how little mention there is of academic excellence. Okay. And where it ranks in terms of investment relative to the community school model and social emotional learning. But let's continue. So overall, the fiscal 2023 budget requests $88.3 billion in discretionary funding for the Department of Education, a $15.3 billion or 20.9% increase from last year. The president is also committed to working with Congress to enact his plan to, ready? Lower costs for American families and expand the productive capacity of the American economy. How might he do that? Could he maybe I don't know, take the reins off of the energy industry perhaps? That would help a lot. That would help reduce costs and improve our productive capacity. You know what else would be stop printing money and keep the border don't just fling wide open the border, please. Could you maybe not do that? That would help too. But I'm really curious how the policies he's about to implement, including the one where he's going to start talking about tuition forgiveness, how that's going to make us more prosperous. But let me continue. The plan includes proposals to cut college costs. Any proposal to cut college costs, which doesn't go straight to the colleges and their endowments and say, y'all need to have some skin in the game because your tuitions have gone up three-digit, over 100%. We're talking multiple hundreds of percents. Okay. In a very short period of time. And you get paid and we have to hold them accountable to pay the taxpayers back. But interestingly, you don't ever have any accountability for whether they're going to be successful, productive, whether they chose a major that was worthy of borrowing $300,000 to go to school. Yeah. Why it would be okay for an Ivy League school to have to sit there. I mean, we talk about during the mortgage crisis, how we said it was rapacious for mortgage lenders to allow a pizza delivery man to buy $1 million home and sign on the dotted line on that mortgage, like how that was just crazy predatory lending. Why isn't it predatory lending to say to somebody, you know what, sign up now to borrow the money for your bachelor's and your master's in filmmaking, something Steven Spielberg never did. Okay. But at Columbia. And then, yes, I know you're borrowing $300,000 and you'd have to literally become Steven Spielberg's, younger twin to actually pay that back. But here's the paperwork. Come on, everything will be fine. Yeah. Yeah. How many people have defaulted? No, what? I'm sorry. Here, sign. Here's the pen. You can keep the pen. It's a pretty pen. It's a Mont Blanc. Keep it. Why are we not going to them and saying, you remember we talked about predatory lending? So why would we cut college costs as the taxpayers? Well, why is it on us? Why are people who never went to college? Why are some of the essential workers, the people who keep the lights on, the people who keep us fed, why should they have to pay for it when they didn't go to college? They shouldn't. That's my answer to that. And then it says they're going to fund historically Black colleges and universities more and the tribal controlled colleges more and all this. Again, they're going to pour lots and lots of funding into specific kinds of colleges, which in my personal opinion are already by their very definition unconstitutional. Or at a minimum, can we count this as reparations? Can we count this as part of our reparations, pretty please? I think so, because if you're going to, I could even maybe buy into that, okay, you're going to go get a college education using this money, which will advance you hopefully to a better job and so forth, beats the hell out of, here's a check, go do whatever the hell you want with it. Sign the taxpayers. Okay. But no, we should invest in that. Anyway, so this is now getting into the specifics of K-12, which of course is my area of concern. And this is the summary of K-12. And I've highlighted some stuff. And then, I'm going to, after I get through all my highlights, which is only 2-3 pages, then we're going to start moving faster. Okay. Proposes historic investments in schools with high poverty rates. Okay. I've highlighted some specific things: learning opportunities and support they need to succeed. Well, I'm just curious. um, Secretary Cardona. If you know what that is, you know what they need to succeed. Could you tell us? Can you give us like items and explain how you know? Why aren't you giving it to them now? Why aren't they getting it now? Why have they not, apparently, by looking at the scores, why have they not had it for the past, I don't know, 40 years or so? So you know so well what they need to succeed. You know the supports they need. Why aren't they succeeding? You were in office last year. What's going on? Just curious. I mean, Okay. Prioritizes the health and well-being of students. Notice again, this was very general. We're investing in high poverty rate schools to give them the supports they need. No explanation, and we don't even know what succeed means. But now we jump right to health. This is the not Health and Human Services. This is the Department of Education. Even Health and Human Services, I'd be like, I don't know, right? But why is education getting involved in the health and well-being of the students? I thought their job was to educate, disting, knowledge. Okay. So right away, we have in the first sentence, disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic policies continue to take a toll on the physical and mental health of students, educators, and school staff. Did you know that you were responsible for the mental health of educators and school staff? Not other workers. Even though these policies were government policies, it affected everybody, but these poor educators. So sad. Recognizing the profound effect, by the way, they themselves voted and nagged for the policies to be what the policies were. Just saying. Recognizing the profound effect of physical and, there it is again, mental health on student social, emotional, and academic success. Among other investments, the budget, why are we capitalizing it? But okay, includes a $1 billion investment to increase the number of counselors, nurses, school psychologists, social workers, and other health professionals in the school. Mom and dad, you listening? Are you listening? Look, please look up in loco parentis and tell me how excited you are to have all these people in a place where they have qualified immunity. And many, many states are now shielding them an extra step beyond in terms of lying to you and grooming your children sexually and ideologically. And we're going to spend $100 billion of taxpayer money on it, on the people who are going to likely recommend that the children of those pesky parents who have those horrible right-wing beliefs. I know it's really sad. They're so abused. We need to look into that. We need to look into them. Maybe first thing we'll do is we'll put them on that list so we can take their guns. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove their children from their homes because it's definitely not healthy. Certainly nothing we're doing inside the school is contributing to their mental health woes. It's only things happening at home because we are perfect. Increased support for children with disabilities. Now, again, if children with disabilities are not getting the money they need to have the free and fair and appropriate and all that kind of education that is equal to what the kids who don't have disabilities have. So if it's special, supports, or they even have to go to a private school because the school doesn't have the supports they need, that gets, in lawsuits, they'll pay that out. Not very often, but every once in a blue moon if you can afford the lawyers. We know, because it's been well documented by the parents who have struggled to sue and have lost, that IDEA is less an issue of funding than it is of corruption in terms of how many middlemen it goes through and how school superintendents and different, state agencies are effectively playing a little shell game with the IDE money and spending it where it's not Title I money too, spending it where it's not exactly supposed to be spent, and then disincentivizing their teachers when it comes to following through on the plans and putting the parent, because parent enforced, the parent in the unenviable position of enforcing federal law. There's no teeth. There's no teeth to it. So what do they want to do? They want to they want to give grants of $16.3 billion to support special ed and related services for students in grades pre-K through 12. And they want to double funding to $932 million for IDEA Part C grants, which support early intervention services for infants and families with disabilities. So now we're talking about infants now? Early intervention for infants? For IDEA? There's people sitting there salivating going, cash cow, how are we going to milk this? And that have a proven record. Where's that proven record? I'd love to see it. The increase also includes $200 million to expand and streamline enrollment. That means we're going to start diagnosing or enrolling kids in this program to justify its existence for the $200 million so we can keep spending it ongoing of, get this, children at risk of developing disabilities. Well, near as I can tell, y'all, that's every single elementary school student at this point, because if you're going to use whole word reading, Lucy Calkins, Fontes Pinnell, guess what? That's all of them. That's all of them. They are now all at risk of developing dyslexia. Not really dyslexia, but dysteachia, because that is not the way you teach reading. So they're going to streamline and expand enrollment of children at risk of developing one. How are they going to figure that out? Are we doing genetic testing? Are we going to go, well, your sibling has it, so maybe you, so let's put you in a program so we can spend some money? How do they even do this? How do they even figure this out? Okay, so then moving on. The budget also more than doubles funding to $250 million for IDEA Part D personnel preparation grants to support a pipeline of special educators at a time when the majority of states are experiencing a shortage of special educators. This means more union members. This also means equity hiring. You cannot say we're doubling funding to 200 as if the only reason we have a shortage of these people is money. That's it. 250 million. Definitely these qualified people are going to come out of the woodwork, and in every single state, we're just going to have people come out. I want to be a special ed teacher. It doesn't say what they're going to be paid. This is they're going to have funding for it. Do you have any idea how many people call themselves special ed teachers who really ought not be walking your dog? There are some wonderful ones, obviously. But when you create a program with the purpose of, and it's a grant program for a very specific kind of job, and you place equity at the tippy top of your priority list, well, you do the math. Okay. Dramatically expands support for, there it is, full service community schools. Full service community schools is code for commie schools, is code for the government running your life. If you don't believe me, go to the CDC, search in their search box community school model, open up that page, and you'll see this goofy little take a tour through our community school model. Take the tour. Oh, do. Please take the tour. I've done the tour on a live show, but take the tour and then come back and tell me if you think I'm crazy. While the education sector has faced shortages in critical staffing areas for decades, which disproportionately impact students of color and students from low-income backgrounds. And I'm sure that has to be, it's a racist thing, right? It has nothing whatsoever to do with some of the other factors impacting the schools that are dominated by that population. No, none of your discipline policies, none of the policies you have about changing the curriculum so that teachers have to teach to test. No, I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. Okay. The COVID, and now they're saying that it's the COVID-19 pandemic. You mean policies? It's the policies that did it, like vaccine mandates, segregated racist professional development, whiteness witch hunts. Like, you need to decenter your whiteness, white teacher. And of course, the total lack of discipline. So I'm sure those things had nothing to do with, people moving around in their assignments or just leaving teaching altogether. And they're saying the tight labor market is really not a tight labor market. There are other things, but there's very few incentives to go into teaching right now. Like, there's literally not an amount of money you could pay me to do it. You could offer me $1 million and I wouldn't do it. Okay. And I could use money. So that tells you something. So let's see, has made shortages worse, negatively impacting the education students receive and continuing to fall hardest on students in, and again, underserved communities. In addition to comprehensive investments across several programs to support A diverse and well-prepared pipeline. My comment, but we'll take diverse as in melanated, trans, or both, well-prepared or not. By the way, what does well-prepared mean? We know this is true. We've seen already who they're hiring. So as far as diverse, yeah, we see that. Well-prepared, not so much. Unless, again, you're using the Marxist dictionary. Well prepared just means well prepared to do the bidding of Big Brother in the school. The budget includes $514 million for the Education, Innovation, and Research Program. Why? Have we not had enough innovation? We don't need innovation. We need to go back to the classical way that it works. We have examples all over the place of what works. Go read the Marva Collins Way. Go overseas to England and have a talk with Miss Snuffy. Look at McHale Academy. Look at the classical academies. Look at Hillsdale academies. Look at the schools that work. And these are not kids from rich households. We know what works. We've known what works for thousands of years, quite frankly, but definitely hundreds. We know what works. And if you're going to spend this much money, see, it used to be you couldn't give what works to everybody because we weren't spending this kind of money on it. And it was reserved for the super rich who could hire private tutors and so forth. Education 1.0, as Dr. Ping calls it. But we are spending more money than kings spent in those days per student. We should be able to give them a classical education and they should be able to thrive. And we could even probably, with the money we're spending, if we cut out a lot of the middlemen and women, we could provide a special needs school specifically devoted to special needs. But no, that would be wrong. We can't have, separate but equal is inherently unequal, except when it works. Except where do you think these parents are suing to take their kids? To special needs schools. Like the Fletcher School here in Charlotte and other schools where they're like, you're not giving me what I need in the public school. Mainstreaming my kid is not working. I need my child to get the services they need. And if they have to go to a school where that's all they do, I'm okay with it. They're not giving parents that choice. We could fund that with the amount of money we're spending, but no. We have to have separate but together. Separate but together is perfectly fine because diversity. All right. So I don't know why we're investing in all of this innovation. We don't need that. Okay, no, I have no issue with supporting multi-language learners. They're not even spending that much on it. Millions and 1.075 billion, that's hardly anything on kids who don't speak English. Okay, but definitely we need more social workers. All right, here we go again. Have you seen anything about academics yet? Except researching innovation. I'm still waiting. We're in K-12. We're in K-12. And mind you, I said we're not supposed to have a specific curriculum, but I saw SEL, and we know SEL is a curriculum. We know it is. It's not a curriculum. And as I mentioned before, this is the Department of Education, not Health and Human Freaking Services. So foster diverse schools. The segregation of students by race and income undermines the promise made nearly 70 years ago following the Supreme Court's ruling in Brown v. Board of Education. The public schools provide an equal opportunity for all students to learn and succeed, especially, wait, where'd the especially go? And my comment, but segregating them inside the school by race is just fine. Affinity groups, you stand over there, let's do a privilege walk. That's okay. As long as we're together in the same building and you feel like shit. All the better to make clear who's oppressor and oppressed. So they're having the budget include $100 million for a grant program to help communities voluntarily develop. I'd love to know what that looks like. What does develop look like? What are they going to approve for these grants? And implement strategies to promote racial and socioeconomic diversity in their schools and classrooms. Any thoughts on what that's going to look like? What do you think that's going to look like? What do you think that's? I think personally that's going to translate to, we came up with a program to throw out all the books by dead white people and bring in books by people who are not white. We need to spend money on books. Or we figured out that what we need to do is we need to purge these old white teachers who've been here for 25 years and hire some new ones with green hair and lots of piercings. That's our new program to make it more diverse. Or, you know what? We're going to implement a mandatory African-American studies class where you can't graduate. And you're also going to have to get a certificate that says that you pledge to be tolerant of, gender inclusive, blah, blah, blah. And we need some grant money to implement that program. I mean, it could be. I don't know. Do you know? Do you know what a voluntarily develop and implement strategies to promote racial and socioeconomic diversity in schools and classrooms will look like for the $100 million? No one does. Okay. And of course, our favorite Marxist term, reimagine the high school to post secondary transition. Reimagine. Wonder what that's going to be like. Well, I can tell you, it's going to be the elimination of graduation requirements, the elimination of standardized tests around all the colleges. It's going to be probably some, elimination of distribution requirements, things of that nature. So the transition from high school to post-secondary will be a lot easier for people who really don't want to deal with rigorous academic work, but they still want to say they went to college for whatever that's going to be worth in the future. Not much. So yeah, they have a $200 million investment focused on a new career connected high schools. Now, the irony is something like this could be really good if it were sort of a like a internship kind of program or whatever. But again, as good as it could be, if I could imagine it to be a good program, why is the federal government doing this? Why? Why is this a proper role of the federal government for our 200 million tax dollars? And of course, we're expanding Pell Grants and equitable access to resources and supports to persist and compete in college. You shouldn't drop out. We want you to stay. Surely you're not dropping out for good reasons, like you shouldn't have been there in the first place. Okay, now here we go. Increase equitable funding. What does that mean? Equitable to compared to what? Compared to whom? To private schools? To other public schools? What does that mean? Increase of over 752 million over the 2021 enacted level. So that's above and beyond. And that includes a $450 million initiative to expand research and development infrastructure at four-year colleges of these colleges. They are quite literally discriminating with your tax dollars. They're specifically expanding. Now, Trump did it too. Okay. So, I mean, people go, oh, he gave more money to HBCUs. And I'm like, super, you're clapping for discrimination not based on race. Go you. All right. But that's what it is. Let's be honest what it is. And as far as research and development infrastructure, yeah. What is that? Research for what? Development for what? Prioritizes the needs of student borrowers. So now we are not only lending money to these kids while the colleges sit on their endowments very stingily, not giving any of it to them and not chipping in when they default on the loans they took to get their worthless degrees. The presidents of the universities are still getting six figures. The professors are still driving fancy cars. Okay. The graduate students are still getting abused and underpaid to teach the courses that the professors who are tenured are not teaching, et cetera, and so forth. But for some reason, on top of all that, we need to help the borrowers, not the financial aid office of the schools. They shouldn't pony up to provide these kinds of customer service and accountability, blah, 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 in between. No, we should pay for that. I mean, granted, the federal government is servicing the loan, but I keep feeling like the colleges should have some skin in the game here, like a match or something, but I don't see it. Bolster our nation's skilled workforce with expansions to career and technical training and adult education. Why is this the responsibility of the federal freaking government? Do you guys see this? Like, am I the only person who's sitting there saying they're doing too much and doing it badly and spending a lot on it? And we're not, the more they spend and the more they do and the more they touch, the less it works. You can't do this many things and have them done well. And all you're doing is politicizing every single one of these activities because now you have giant pots of money sitting there in the hands of unelected bureaucrats who get to decide because most of them are grants. Remember, when you get a grant, you have to apply. You have to fill out an application. Human beings are on the other end of that application going, no. Yes. With your tax dollars. That person's a friggin' hired hack. And they don't leave, by the way. They come in with whatever their ideology is, and they stay through the next administration. It's not like the next president comes in and goes, you're all fired. Get out. Much as I would like that, that's not how it works. There are holdovers in there since Obama, at least. There's probably some Bushies in there. There's people in there that just, they don't even have a particular political affiliation, but they are loyal to the bureaucracy, aren't they? Which by definition makes them progressive, because that's what you do. You want money spending to continue to go up, so you keep getting raises, so you keep getting promoted, so your benefits keep increasing, you don't get fired. You'll get your retirement for the rest of your days while you go get a second job or make things on Etsy while you're still collecting your lovely salary and living in your bungalow in Boca. That's who they're loyal to, not you, the taxpayer. But they're reviewing the grants. So whatever their personal opinion is, that's what you get. And don't you think that when you go for a job in these institutions, they're vetting you based on they're going to check every inch of your social media. They're going to look at every bit of your political, background. And if you ever express an anti-Department of Education or anti-big government view, you think you're working there ever? Please. Good luck. Someone should do that. Somebody should do really go deep dive undercover and create an identity worthy of the CI frickin' A and become somebody who goes on the inside and documents exactly how much graft and grift there is in this system. But it's just too damn much money. And like I said, we're talking grants. Now they'll give you like the requirements to get the grant, but it's still very subjective. All right. So now they're just going by program area. I'm not going to go through all of this except to show you, look, social, emotional, mental health, $1 billion for new school-based health professionals program. This is K-12 by this is elementary, K through 5. Just K-5. To support the mental health needs of our students and their families. Do you think that's your responsibility? I don't think it's mine. I don't want the federal government helping me with my family. I don't want them helping my children with their mental health either. Just, can you teach them to read, please? Increasing the number of counselors, nurses, and health professionals in our schools. Increasing the number of them in the schools. This is not going to end well, you guys. Have you seen the quality of nurses lately? Yeah. Okay. And building the pipeline for these critical staff. What does that mean? Building the pipeline for these critical staff. That's why they want to put all this money into higher ed. They want to build their own personal pipeline of their own ideologically aligned nurses and counselors and social workers, psychologists. Starting to sink in now. They want to build their own pipeline. They've been doing it forever. Now they're just coming out and saying it, but they're using your money to do it. And then, of course, we have to dramatically, look, $468 million, an increase of $438 million over the prior budget, to dramatically expand the full service community schools. All of these are ahead of it. And then the diverse school, teacher quality training, diversity. I've yet to see anything about literacy. We get Title I grants, full service community schools. This says makes competitive 5-year grants to school districts in partnership with community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations. This would be your advocates for youth, that puts the gender stuff in there. This would be your BLM in the classroom. This would be your, what else? The Zinn Education Project. They're all nonprofit. And other public or private entities. Okay, now we're getting into Castle, Panorama Ed. Not to mention lots of health companies. Lots and lots of healthcare companies. There are actually, in New Jersey, there's a sitting member of their assembly. There's an assemblyman who has a conflict of interest. He's sitting there and he actually weighs in on, I think he's even on the education committee, and he's like on the board, or he's part of the management of one of these health service companies that he wants to be attached to the schools and get paid with Medicaid dollars. And the average taxpayer is walking around going, isn't it great? They're going to put a health facility right attached to the school. It's going to be so convenient. Yeah. Big Brother's going to be all up in your kid's brain. Here, honey, have some antidepressants. Here's your hormones. Here's this. No, we don't need to tell your mom and dad. It's fine. Okay. To provide comprehensive, look, academic comes first now. Maybe they thought this other stuff was really scary. So now I'm just curious how the social workers and counselors and psychologists and nurses are helping with the academic stuff. Just curious. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's some magical way that I don't know about. In the school setting for students, student family members, and community members by integrating existing school community programs and implementing coordinated strategies that can impact neighborhoods with high rates of poverty, childhood obesity, academic failure, and involvement of community members in the justice system. And they honestly think these people think they're God. They think that if they make a big old fancy community school with a beautiful health center and a little grocery store and a laundromat and coming soon dorms, they're going to solve all these problems. That's what it's, what's missing in these communities? It was a giant community school. If only we had this, they wouldn't have these problems. Did you guys know that? Do you believe that for a single second? Do you think that they have entertained any other potential solutions? Do you think they've sat down with social scientists like maybe, I don't know, Thomas Sowell and had a conversation about how and why people in these communities make the decisions they make? Because, he's written like a few dozen books on it. No, they're not even remotely interested in any other cause other than lack of social justice. That's basically what it is, because that's what they think is missing. And they would, increase the request would support an expanded cohort of grantees that would support up to 2.5 million students. So they want to expand to more and more kids. They want to gobble up as many kids into these programs as they possibly can. Learning centers, instruction, teacher and school leader incentive grants. Leader is basically people who are going to be really adept at reporting on people who don't toe the line, because it says they make competitive awards to help develop, implement, improve, and expand human capital management systems or performance-based compensation systems. Love to see what that's going to end up being. All right, so then here's, school leadership recruitment, blah, 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 blah. We're scrolling down. We get to fostering diverse schools. I still haven't seen much about academics, you guys. Not much at all. So here again, we have the well-documented persistent negative effects of racial isolation and concentrated poverty by supporting, that's what they're going to address, by supporting voluntary efforts to increase school racial and socioeconomic. We talked about this. I still want to know how. They would make competitive awards to LEAs, that's schools basically, alone, in consortia, or in partnership with state educational agencies that have significant achievement gaps and racial socioeconomic segregation within or across districts. Program funds would support voluntary planning grants, and for applicants with well-designed plans, wonder what that means, implementation grants to carry out activities in those plans, including, for example, open enrollment that promote racial and socioeconomic diversity in schools, or other student assignment policies that consider. So we're going to give preferential treatment to kids who are not white, to diversify the populations of these schools on the assumption and premise that the only reason that they are segregated is due to racism. Because this is what we would call de facto race segregation, not de jure. These people are clustered based on neighborhood and so forth. And the way to solve that problem is to go back to the neighborhood school model, the ISP model. But no, we can't do that. All right, at least that's my suggestion. Or, real school choice. Give parents the option and give them the dollars. Going down to charter school grants. Isn't this fascinating? Did you know that your Democratic administration is actually perfectly fine with charter grants? For all they talk about, oh, charters are the root of all evil. And mind you, I'm not a huge fan. And here's part of why. Okay. The request, they're saying, through grants to state entities, charter school developers, that's private people, and private entities, and charter school management organizations, also private. Charter school grants support the startup of new charter schools and the replication and expansion of high quality charter schools serving students in pre-kindergarten through grade 12. And they're going to also improve existing ones. But then they say the request would also continue and build on the department's efforts to ensure that program funds support schools that are opened and operated with demonstrated family and community support. It's basically putting it to the majority out there. No, it's like, do you agree with this school? You want a classical school that teaches classical stuff? No, we don't like it. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't have it. So it becomes this little political campaign. Do not contribute to racial socioeconomic segregation based on community demographics. Well, who's defining that? Who's defining contribute? Provide meaningful. So that, by the way, catches up the schools that are science schools, math schools, whatever, because you do end up with imbalances because, heavy Asian populations, or you end up with more, white and Asian kids than you do Black and Hispanic kids. But nobody wants to talk about the fact that a lot of the private schools are scooping up the high performing Black kids and sending them off to private school, not the charter schools. We're not talking about that, but that's what's happening in Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia. Is they're claiming that it is too segregated. It's too racist because of who goes there, who gets in there, because it's a test school. So then those schools will cease to exist if they either can't get funded or they can't change their, the way that they're running. And if they can make do, I guess, on the funding they're getting locally, and if you've got support in the state and parental support and so forth for raising that money, they might not need this grant money. But remember what I said at the outset. This money may be optional. You'll be able to screw the federal government. We don't need any of their 440 million. Our state charters are going to operate independently and we don't screw you. We're not going to be subject to this. Okay. But you may or may not be able to do that, or you may or may not have the political capital to do that. The voters might go, why are you walking away from this money? Who knows what they're going to do? Why are you taking it from our tax dollars? That's when you get into those fights within a state of but it's taking it away from public school. And, you can't make everybody happy, right? This is why you shouldn't have the government directly administering this stuff. Anyway, so migrant education. Yeah, we got to educate the people we're letting into the country. We can't let them wander around, homeless, same thing. Okay. Rural, moving on. What I want to do is look how far we had to go. Page 21. Comprehensive literacy development grants. 192 million. So it's just that much. We're pushing 70% illiteracy in America, but toss you some coins, some shekels for literacy. This program provides competitive grants to SEAs that then award sub-grants to eligible entities to support efforts to improve literacy instruction in high-need schools or early childhood education programs. Definitely secondary to mental health. I'm sure the mental health has nothing to do with the literacy problems. I'm sure the poverty has nothing to do with the literacy problems. I'm sure. Never mind. Y'all get it. I'm sure you do. I have a smart audience. Okay. Ooh, look, a whole 10.5 million in civics education. Now, you're probably going to say, Deb, you're a hypocrite. Why do you want the federal government funding civics education? And they would surely be influencing it. You're right. Of course you're right. However, they're giving almost $500 million to, diversity mental health crap. I'm a little more worried about that, let's just say. And I think this shows where their values are. Because remember, as we were told at the very beginning, a budget reflects your values. So I just want you guys to know where their values are, right? They're, so moving on, blah, 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 impact. Okay, so we're getting down to special ed. I'm just kind of scrolling past all this because I want to you guys can look at this yourself. There's nothing in here. I've covered most of what I think is really the issue. Okay, so wait, this one I want to see. Doubling Pell Grant. Okay, so now where I get really confused is when we get down into the line item stuff where they start showing these charts. Please, I apologize to your eyes. Okay. So here we have this page is not really the issue. It's kind of down here where we get to impact. Where is it? Oh, here, full service community schools. And they're talking about the increase, the percent increase as compared to 2022. Look at the increase. 1,460%. What 1,460% increase for full service community schools. We've been talking about how that's a thing, and a lot of people go, conspiracy theorists, you're crazy people. 1,460%. Okay. And then getting down to where else? There was something else I saw here that really threw me for a loop. And I will admit to you, I don't 100% understand it because it seemed it seemed kind of strange to me that they were putting in a number of like 0. So I'm trying to get to the loans part where they have the receipts or the amount that they're taking in from loans. And yeah, here we go. General fund receipts. This is where I'm really confused. If you guys understand accounting or budgets and you can help me out, because as I look at it, it looks a certain way. So they have general fund receipts, and these are all kinds of loan payments. Perkins loan payments, blah, 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 teach, downward, blah, 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 student financial assistant debt collection. And here it says they were like, as compared to 2022, and they're showing negative. First of all, this says 0%. And then they're saying from last year, they're going to collect 84.82% less. And they have 0% as collected, as receipts. Am I missing something? Are they planning for debt forgiveness? I don't know how to read this, but this struck me as very weird. Like president's budget compared 2022, because I know that they had a lot of debt deferral during COVID. So seeing negative stuff over here, I was like, all right, you received less money because you deferred the payments and people had more time to stretch it out. But I'm seeing a whole lot of money in the negative. I'm seeing a whole lot of minus 100%, minus 72%, minus 100%. Am I reading that wrong? Oh, you want me to blow up the numbers? I'm sorry. Yeah, here, let me do that. And I'll go to that. Ooh, can I go to that area? Let me see if I can go to the place. Okay, so what I want you guys to see is do you see how over here, let's see if I can get it out. Okay. So you see this area over here? This entire section, these are loan payments. So am I missing something? I don't why are those negative? That's what my question is. So I gave you guys the link to the document. Maybe somebody can look it over and get back to me and say, "Oh, Deb, you're totally reading it wrong. That's not what it is." And I mean, that's very possible. I don't understand the nitty-gritty of the line items. But when I look at that and you see how it says general fund receipts, and they've got all of these loan subsidies, right? Modification, downward reestimate, downward reestimate. That's looking like they're planning to take in no money. But again, I could totally be wrong. It just struck me as strange. The main thing that I was looking to explain to you guys or show you or whatever you want to call it was that this budget was really pretty heavily slanted towards community schools and social justice, diversity, mental health, and all that razzmatazz. And it's enormous. It's a gigantic amount of money. The total, I think they said at the very beginning, what was it, 83 billion, I think, that they are asking Congress for. So if you are tight with your member of Congress, you might want to get on the phone, write them a note to say, I have questions. I don't understand why our federal government is doing all of this when we have 9% inflation. So that means our dollar's worth diddly shit. Okay. And y'all do nothing well. Like what you do, you don't do well. In fact, you do it extraordinarily poorly. And so we're not really that keen to have you do more than, and there's just a lot of terms that they don't define that I'm not comfortable with. 10 points for using razzmatazz in a sentence. Anyway, I apologize because I was over here on my second monitor reading and doing all my thing. And so I have no idea what y'all are asking. I hope you've been mostly having a conversation with yourselves, but I am opening the floor to comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, things of that nature. I'm also going to go looking for, there was another document that had a link in it from Cardona, which I found very interesting because it linked to something else that had even further description of the budget, and it got used even more flowery language. So I was going to try to find that and see if I could show you. But in the meantime, do you guys have do you agree with the stuff I'm saying, or do you think this stuff is good for the federal government to do? Because maybe I'm all wet here, but I just think it's crazy. Personally, they're not doing a good job, and I think that there are other entities that could do far better for much, much less. And that's kind of my argument in all of this, that this is not an effective use of our money. I'm very skeptical about most of the things they're doing. I definitely don't think that these community schools are a good idea. Do you guys want me to go over and grab that community school thing from the CDC and go through it again? Or are you cool with doing it yourself? It's completely 100% up to you. I can walk through it if you want or not. It is Good Friday and Friday afternoon, and you guys probably have other things to do. But yeah, a taxation is theft girl. So I am too. So I'm extremely biased. And of course, I'm also biased because I have my handy dandy. If you haven't gotten your shirt, these are available at thereasonwelearn.com, which Teespring will not release. I thought I was buying a custom Teespring domain, and instead they bought my thereasonwelearn.com domain, and now they won't give it back to me. So yeah. So that's why I don't have a thereasonwelearn.com website, because I thought I was getting a Teespring domain, and instead they took it. It was the real domain. It wasn't thereasonwelearn.teespring. It was this. So anyway, I have these. Just walk away from public schools. You can get it in many different colors. And then on the back, it also has a Hannah Arendt quote, which is about the purpose of totalitarian education is not to help you form, whatever the conclusions or whatever, but prevent you from being able to make any. It's something like that. So sweatshirts too. I have one of each. But anyway, thank you guys for coming. I thought this would be a really important thing to go through, because they're really going crazy with this mental health and school stuff. And if you did not watch the show the other day with Christy Grace, who I saw here in the comments briefly, I don't know if she's still here. She might have left for the day, but she talks about what's going on in higher ed in that interview. It's long, but definitely if you can get through like the first hour, it's really good. Oh, just go to thereasonwelearn.com because that's the Teespring. And it's easy to remember, but a pain in the butt because I wanted to use it for my website and Teespring won't let me have it. So I can't. That's why my website is debphilman.com. I own other The Reason We Learns, but not the .com. So anyway, so the interview with Christy Grace is important because it explains how having professors in higher education tinker around with your identity and and neuroscience and stuff is a huge problem for adults. And what I'm asking all my audience to do, if you watch that, and I will try to clip some clips so that there's some shorter segments to get the important points across, but I want people to imagine the scenario she went through that she describes in about the first 40 minutes or so of the video. Imagine you're 9 or 10 and you don't have, you'll have less dissonance, you'll have less pain in the moment, as far as, wait, this is different from what I know, and this is really uncomfortable and I don't like it. But you're so much more likely to go, okay, makes sense. All right, yeah, I'll do what you say. And that, yeah, teacher. And or that, in other words, so like if you think, well, I'll just teach my kid at home and they'll have a solid foundation, I'll send them to school and they'll be resistant. They might be. They'll also be psychologically traumatized. So it's a catch-22. Because the adults, they'll be more like the adults. They'll be more like I have a solid set of values and, sense of self and boundaries and everything. And now my teachers and these social workers and all these people are assaulting them on a daily basis in every subject, in every class that I'm in for 13 years. You're going to be in agony, absolute agony. And that can manifest in all kinds of different ways. And that's why it's so galling to me, because they've been doing this for years. at least a decade. This is not like the last couple of years they've been doing this. They've been doing it for a long, long time. And then we wonder why so much cutting, why so many eating disorders, why so much gender dysphoria, why is this happening? Well, they've been working on dismantling identities and getting into the mental health business in schools for a long time. And so those kids, teenagers especially, who've had more time with their parents to have, if they have, and they have more of a sense of self, you hit puberty, you're now having your sense of self assaulted to a greater degree. That's why they want to start earlier. They want to start earlier when the kids are real little, because then they're not dealing with all the mess of what happens when the kids have that conflict. That's very messy. People die. It's not good. They don't want that. They don't want them to die yet. They just want them to like live long enough to be the cannon fodder for the revolution. So we can't have them, we can't have them doing themselves in just yet. The only people happy about that are, the climate alarmists. They're okay with it. But the activists who want to use them to bring the revolution to America, they figure if we start in kindergarten, this will feel more normal to them, and they'll just be really angry, vicious, perfect little soldiers for the state, and they won't take it out on themselves. And if you think I'm crazy, go have a talk with Christy Grace. Anyway, there's always somebody in the audience who thinks I'm nuts, even if they're not here right now on the replay. Thank you so much for coming, you guys. The link was in the comments. I will, for the budget itself, I will also put it in the description below. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I'll see you on Monday. Bye, guys.